Hello, everyone. How are you doing? We're going to be talking some Studio Ghibli today. So we'll let some people get in here, hopefully, and we'll get started here soon on a tier list. I was thinking I really wanted to, or just lately, I've been thinking a lot about Studio Ghibli. So I was like, I feel like I should do a tier list of it. I don't know how many people will tune into this compared to the Haikyuu streams, but um, yeah, it was just something that I was really thinking about a lot recently. So I wanted to talk some Studio Ghibli. We can kind of first go over just a couple of channel updates. I hope you guys watched my new Hinata video. I feel like it turned out pretty well, and views wise, it's doing like extremely well. So hopefully that continues. So that was really exciting. Still working through some copyright issues, so we'll see if uploads are sporadic a little bit. That's why. But overall, I have two big videos planned for the rest of this month. I'm working on a Jujutsu Kaisen video called The Legacy of Jujutsu Kaisen or something along those lines that will either be out tomorrow or the day after, I think. And then I'm thinking to end the month, I'm going to talk about Hoshiyumi. So I feel like that will be a really fun video. I've been wanting to do a video specifically on him for a while. Uh, but right now I've been really thinking a lot about Studio Ghibli, so I figured it would be really fun to do a tier list of their entire catalog. So I can actually I'll pull up the tier list right now. So we can start going over it. So this is not obviously not just Miyazaki; it is Studio Ghibli. I haven't seen every film that they've done. I've seen every Miyazaki film, but so there's going to be like 4 or 5, I think, that I haven't seen. But if anyone in the chat has seen them, then I'll tell me where you would put it, and I'll put it there. And I'll kind of talk about what because a lot of these I plan to watch in the upcoming weeks. Like I'm always trying to catch them in theaters and everything. Um, and so yeah, I'll tell you kind of like what my expectations are of these films. I think maybe there's one like major film that I haven't seen, but I've seen most of the big ones, even the non Miyazakis. So we'll let a few more people get in here. Uh, oh yeah, I love love Studio Ghibli. Yeah, it's gonna be fun to talk about. Like, they just have so many great movies. There's just so much to talk about with them. So, yeah, that should be very good. And we can kind of go over the tiers. I mean, they're pretty straightforward. Peak is like some of Studio Ghibli's best or some of the best movies you'll ever come across. And then a lot of them are still excellent. Maybe there's personal reasons, like I just don't vibe with it quite as much. So it goes there, but there's not really like any inherent flaws in the film. Fun vibes, like I felt like that was a good capture for a lot of Studio Ghibli films. Are just like great vibes all around, you know. And then we've got Minor Miss. I don't even know if there will really be any that hit this category, but I felt like it was good to have. And then haven't seen. Again, if I haven't seen it, I'll put it there. But if y'all have, let me know. And yeah, we can I'll rate it accordingly. So we can kind of just jump right in here with Kiki's Delivery Service. I feel like my voice is going out already. The stream's just starting. Sorry about that. Yeah, Kiki's Delivery Service is I feel like it's an excellent. I don't think it's quite the peak of Miyazaki, but it does a lot of things really well. It's one of the best slice of life vibes, right? Like it reminds me a lot of like Free Run. Um, in terms of just obviously Free Run's very different in terms of power system and like direction of the story, but there's a lot of slice of life fantasy vibes here. A lot of people have talked about the entrepreneurship angle, where this is like the movie about entrepreneurship, weirdly, about her developing this service. And I think that's really great. It's such a comfort movie, but it is beyond fun vibes because it does everything and executes everything so well. That I think because of that, Kiki's Delivery Service is definitely in the excellent category. I don't know if it quite goes as deeply thematically as some of these other works. I think it'll very likely end maybe middle of the pack excellent. Like it sets out to be a kind of mundane story about coming of age story, and I think it does that really well. It's super fun, super comforting, just not quite to the level of peak, I think, thematically, that others reach, or just in terms of, like, total execution, and the reason I say that is because next we have My Neighbor Totoro, which I do think is peak. These 2 are kind of similar. They're slice of life, vibey, right? But, My Neighbor Totoro, I just genuinely think is the greatest kids film of all time, like, for sure out of any kids films that I've ever seen growing up, and I actually didn't watch this growing up. I didn't see this till, like, a couple of years ago, and I still think it's like, I wish I would've watched this growing up. Um it One thing that I think is really interesting about My Neighbor Totoro, and we can talk about, its double feature with Grave of the Fireflies. That's really, really interesting that they, decided to, or used like a crazy marketing strategy to have a double feature of just 2 polar opposite films. But I think in My Neighbor Totoro, there is like a little bit more to it. And it comes near the end sequence, especially like the first time I watched it, where you think there's a chance that the mother has died, and the youngest daughter, it goes missing and she's running for her mom, and you're like, this could have turned into the most tragic thing, like, out of nowhere. um and then of course it doesn't, and it's, very happy, in a as good of an ending as you could ever imagine for a kids film. But I think that extra layer to it, especially like the first time I watched it, I was like, am I about to start crying? Like, is this gonna turn this sad? So I think, Totoro is so much fun. Its soundtrack is unbelievable. I mean, that we're gonna say that for all of them, but I do think Totoro's is maybe a little more iconic than others. Um, and, and I think that maybe is why it puts it into peak. Like, it just is the perfect film. Like, there is nothing I would change about it. I don't think it needs to demand more of its, I'm not looking for anything more out of it. And so it's definitely one of the best. The Tales of Princess Kaguya, I've actually not seen. And I will be seeing when it's in theaters, I think like in November. And this is one that I expect could definitely be in peak. Um, I really, really wanna see it. I feel like I should have seen it for making this list, but I just really wanted to talk about Ghibli. Uh, and I also haven't seen From Up on Poppy Hill, which I don't anticipate will be quite as good, as Tales of Princess Kaguya. Like, that's my expectations. I don't know if any of y'all seen either of these 2, and if you have, like, where would you rate them? But we can move on because I have seen Only Yesterday. Randomly, we're getting to, like, a handful that I haven't seen, but, Only Yesterday is really good, and I actually think I like it a little more than Kiki's Delivery Service. So this is by Takahata, who does, Tales of Princess Kaguya, Grave of the Fireflies, and who was a mentor figure, right, for Miyazaki and also co-founder of the studio. Um, and this one is also slice of life. It's really interesting that, like, the first 3 are, like, really slice of life, but Only Yesterday just really hits in terms of looking back on your childhood and kind of the nuance that you have around that coming of age time. I just love how that was handled in this film. It's also really comforting. Kiki's Delivery Service is maybe a better vibe, but I think Only Yesterday has real, real emotional impact, and the older you get, the more I think it hits, and I think it's one of the most underrated in Studio Ghibli's, lineup. And I don't think as many people have seen it. I think it came out in 1991, if I'm not mistaken. So on the back of Totoro and Grave of the Fireflies, as the studio was really finding its footing. Um, but it's really Takahata just like flexing his muscles, right? Like, everyone knows how good Miyazaki is, and Takahata doesn't get as much love, especially from people in the West. Like, I don't know about in Japan, I'm sure everyone knows Takahata. But yeah, Only Yesterday just like blew me away when I watched it the first time. It could be that I didn't have expectations for it really. Like, it was just like, oh, this is just like a random film. I think I actually watched it. I wrote some articles for Collider uh, at one point, and I watched it for a video that or an article that I was writing it about, and I like didn't expect it to be anything insane, and it was really, really blew me away, and it stood out when I was watching a bunch of other movies for that article. Another 2, like, this is gonna look bad, like, when people come in, but I haven't seen Pompoko, and I haven't seen The Cat Returns. Um, but don't worry, we've got a lineup of a lot that I've seen. So we can, again, if anyone's seen any of the ones that I haven't seen, like, let me know what you think about it, and we can talk. Like, expectations are, because this is, are they both Takahata? I think Pompoko is. I'm not 100% certain about The Cat Returns. Um, so anything by Takahata is like gonna be great, I think. Um, yeah, I think it's interesting that there's a lot of slice of life and Castle, and I mean that's in a theme of all of Studio Ghibli's works is they capture um the nuances and the smaller moments of life really well. But Castle in the Sky is a little bit more grand in terms of the story it's trying to tell. And I actually prefer it over Only Yesterday and Kiki's Delivery Service. I think it's really close with Only Yesterday. And it could be, personally, I love the designs of the world so much that it kind of puts it over the edge for me. There might be a few little nuances in the story that are not quite as executed as well as maybe Kiki's Delivery Service or Only Yesterday. That feels like it's really, really straightforward, like clear cut storytelling, where Castle in the Sky might feel a little more clunky with the introduction of the girl falling and how kind of the plot unfolds. But even so, I think the film is so brilliant. Pompoko is Takahata. Okay, that's what I thought. Do you know The Cat Returns? Is that Takahata as well? Um, Sounds like I need to brush up on some of my Takahata films. But yeah, back to Castle in the Sky. Like, I think the vibe of Castle in the Sky is the feeling of like something that I have searched out, like, in other films. Like, it's something that feels, and this is kind of like a hard thing to explain, and it happens a lot in Studio Ghibli films, but it's like as you're watching the movie, you're like, "I have thought or dreamt this kind of a vibe, but I've never, like, never really knew it until I watch it, and I'm like, this feels like it resonates with me nostalgically, even though I've, like, never seen the film before." That's how I feel about, like, Dune, and I think that's a quality that that film has, is, like, it just has a way of being so universal, even though its world building is so unique, and I think Castle in the Sky captures that quality, if that makes any sense. The Cat Returns is it Morita? His only Ghibli movie. Right, right. Because there is a couple of directors who have done one-offs for them. So I'm definitely interested in watching that, but I do feel like some of the Takahata films are a little higher on my list. But if anyone has seen it, let me know if it's underrated or anything. But yeah, I don't know if that made any sense about Castle in the Sky, but the fantasy feeling of the castle is so good. I think it has a very solid plot, and it's thematically, I think it really holds up a lot, and so I think it's on that kind of upper echelon of not the very top tier of Miyazaki films, but I think it's right there. But that could be a little personal preference. Like, it really just the vibes of that movie are just like so good. So now we've got Spirited Away, which is, of course, one of the best films um, ever made. Like, it definitely is near the top here. Absolute banger. I remember watching Spirited Away when I was a kid. My brother got very scared of it, so we didn't watch it a ton after that. And yes, it was my older brother. And but yeah, Spirited Away is so good. Again, it kind of has that feeling of just like really endearing fantasy world building. Um, and the story of Chihiro is so universal. I mean, there's a reason that this is the film that won his first Oscar and got Western acclaim. I don't necessarily think for anime films, Oscars are, is the end all be all in terms of which film's better, because it just happened to really break through, I think. But it is an amazing achievement. Um, And here the stream. I need to blow my nose real quick, so I'll be right back because I'm about to like sneeze all over this stream. So, and I know a bunch of viewers are just hopping in right now. Just give me one moment, and I'll be right back on the stream. All right. Sorry about that. It's allergy season out here in Texas, and I just woke up, and all of a sudden, my nose started going. Anyways, back to Spirited Away, so we can get dialed here. Yeah, Spirited Away is such a brilliant film. It never gets old. It's really interesting when you think about all the readings into Spirited Away. I think because obviously you've got one of the most iconic coming of age stories ever put to animation, but you also have a lot of really great nuances, um, to some of the ideas in the story. Um, and so, something that I think is really, really great about Spirited Away is like, there's like the connections to like prostitution and like weird, interesting readings of like Japanese culture that like just went over my head. But there's so much depth to the story that you can like read into, like with the bathhouses and everything. So like I think there's a ton of depth. It has just a great straightforward story, and obviously the animation is unbelievable. Like, so I'm part of a movie club with a lot of my pals, and we just recently watched Spirit, like a early 2000s DreamWorks film. And this is another theme that will be, throughout all of Studio Ghibli, but in particular, Spirited Away, as it was their switch to incorporating more digital effects into their works. But we were talking about the animation, and it was just like we can't even compare any Western animation at that time to the works of Studio Ghibli, because like that's how much of another level they were on. Um, and so uh so the level that they are on is just like unbelievable animation wise. It's really interesting to see their change from Princess Mononoke, where it was the last fully hand drawn film, to switching to Spirited Away, and yet there's no drop off in quality. Um, in terms of animation. And the No Face is such an iconic character. Like there's so many great things in terms of Miyazaki getting to play with his world building and you know his character designs and his creature designs. It's just on another level. And so Spirited Away is really, I mean, there's not too much to be said. Like it is such an iconic movie. It is one of the best movies I've ever seen. um Earwig is missing from your list, and that's one I haven't seen. Yeah, I was actually just looking at this because when I mentioned Oscar, Boy and the Heron is also missing from the list, which is, so I maybe at the end we'll add a couple. I've not seen Earwig though. Della, have you seen it? I'm scared. I feel like that's the last one. Nick, my volleyball team has been getting cooked. Oh no, we lost our last two games. The first we lost 25-7, 25-13, second 25-10, 25-11. You just gotta get on your Hinata ball boy grind and go through a big training arc. Everyone has some failures. You'll come out on the other side of it, right? Just try to think about what your team and you can do to get better. But yeah, so maybe at the end here we'll add a couple. Let me know if there's any others besides. I wonder if this list was like just a few years old. Um, haven't seen it. Heard it's not that good though. Yeah, I've heard it's really bad. I mean, I've seen like clips of it. I remember when it came out, it was like, oh, the Studio Ghibli is done for. Like they have fallen off. At least that's how I felt when I saw that trailer. And it's really interesting how the studio, the studio is in so many ways Takahata and Miyazaki, and obviously Takahata passed away. I think while Boy and the Heron was being developed. Um, and without them, they just haven't found people who can string together multiple projects for a long period of time, and they lost, I know they lost one of their other good directors, and so it'll be interesting to see how they move, because The Boy and the Heron's so good, um, and it's not on here, so I might see if I can add it, or we'll at least talk about it for sure. But Grave of the Fireflies is like one of the most devastating things I've ever seen in my life. I think most people agree. Um, I'm gonna put it right behind Spirited Away. I don't necessarily there is such a finite difference between the 2 in terms of quality, if there is any at all, and I definitely put it a little bit over Totoro. It's so interesting that they released Grave of the Fireflies and Totoro together, as a double feature. I mean, it makes sense from just how do you market Grave of the Fireflies? Well, you put, like, the most cutesy, um warm movie to accompany it with and to get people into the theater. But Grave of the Fireflies is such a harrowing depiction of war and the devastating, but it's not, it's the backdrop of war, right? These are not characters who are actually fighting. Um, and that's just what's so devastating about it. The pacing of the film, the way it starts with you knowing the outcome just makes it almost all the more dreadful of how do we get to this point? Um, and I think it's actually a really smart decision. It's really interesting, I think, when you talk narrative structuring and the structuring of, um, should you some of the films, and obviously Grave of the Fireflies plays into this, of spoiling the ending before, but here it has a really great effect, because I think if you didn't know that the boy was going to die at the end of the film, but you know that right in the beginning, so it's not a spoiler, obviously, and so as the film's going on, you're just dreading it happening versus having this tension on, is a bomb going to drop, or is it going to be some random thing that happens to him? Or, is he going to make it out alive? I think it really adds to the dread of the film, and really allows the pacing to work. It is one of the most devastating films I've ever seen. I don't know how many times I'll watch it in my life because it's so hard to watch. But it is something that I think, is such a poignant inclusion into the Ghibli lineup. And it is, without seeing the Tales of Princess Kaguya, I mean, from Takahata, it is an absolute masterclass. Um, and I also have a pretty funny story about Grave of the Fireflies, which was in high school in like my freshman or sophomore year. My history teacher was like, she was actually the coach of the women's volleyball team, and very kind of like jockey teacher, like kind of. I mean, she was not that might be a bit aggressive of a term for her, but um, she definitely wasn't into anime. But one day, talking about like World War II, she brought up Grave of the Fireflies. It was so funny because she was like, Grave of the Fireflies is like this most devastating film. I know it's one of those weird anime movies, but like Grave of the Fireflies is really, really good, and it's really sad and like dark and stuff. And it was so funny because it was like, that like as a history teacher, she came across this film, or like in school or something when she was in school. But like for her to just like randomly be like, oh, I know it's one of those weird anime things, but like this film's really sad, like you should check it out, which just kind of cracked me up. Like I'll just never forget that. And I'll never forget that's one of the only people who ever had mentioned Grave of the Fireflies like in person, to me growing up, and that's how it is. But yeah, absolutely devastating and brilliant film. I do think that does speak to its accessibility, because it's depicting, obviously, you know, real events that happened, through these fictional characters. That it is a way that you can show to people who aren't into anime, and to show the kind of depth, of story, and I think that is a quality that a lot of Ghibli films have. I think Spirited Away is a huge entry point. I mean, we know that Ghibli's a huge entry point. There's a lot of, it kind of gets a bad rep in the anime community. There's a lot of Ghibli fans who don't consider themselves anime fans. And there's like a weird, stupid tension there. Um, I can't even buy those hard candies from Grave of the Fireflies without crying. Yeah, oh my gosh, like it's so devastating, and good to see you in the chat, Angela. Shout out to one of the members of the channel. But yeah, Grave of the Fireflies is just devastating film, and one that everyone should watch if they haven't, but maybe you only watch once. Um, Howl's Moving Castle is my hot take. I feel like I'm putting it in fun vibes. Up on Poppy Hill is a class movie. Um, yes, I really want to watch it. What so you would put it in probably like excellent tier, you're thinking? Because if we get enough people who've seen it and want to put it into excellent, then I'm very, very down for that. Um, for sure. So Howl's Moving Castle, I think, is one that a lot of people rate really highly. And it's a good movie. Like I enjoy it. I think Howl's a great character. A lot of beautiful scenery in this movie. I don't think the fantasy vibes actually are quite as compelling to me as Castle in the Sky. And for me, I always felt the narrative was just a little more uneven than some of the other Ghibli films. And I felt like there should have been, it expands beyond what the book is. And I think because of that, it just didn't quite nail it for me. I don't know. There's some quality that didn't hit for me. I know Howl is like the hot boy character, and so I feel like a lot of people like tend to really like him. And I feel like rate the movie maybe higher than it actually is because of that. It's a good movie. I have a great time with it. It'll probably be, near the top of this, but for me it isn't quite, it just feels too uneven when I'm watching it. But that's not to say there's not great moments. Like Howl melting is absolutely hilarious, and how dramatic he is really good. Um, some great whimsical moments in this movie. I just feel like it doesn't quite put it together as cleanly as like a Kiki's Delivery Service that's so in tune with this slice of life entrepreneurship story, or like a Castle in the Sky, even to My Neighbor Totoro, that really executes their vision better. For me, but I feel like that is probably my biggest hot take when it comes to Studio Ghibli. I think this is one of the Ghibli movies where the visuals over storyline. Yeah, I mean that is really true. Like the visuals and the atmosphere do really they do a lot of work here, and maybe it's on the cusp of excellent. But for some reason, I just felt the story, especially the ending, just never lands for me. Um, and I feel like because of that, I have to put it in fun vibes. Uh, but I know that there's a lot of people who definitely rate it closer to peak than that. Ocean Waves is unfortunately another one I haven't seen. Like I'm getting outed here of the ones I haven't seen, but When Marnie Was There is brilliant, and I feel like not enough people have seen it. Um, and I've probably got it right around there. I could see Kiki's Delivery Service. I've watched When Marnie Was There a little more recently, and was so blown away by it. I knew nothing of this film going into it. One of the best modern Ghibli films. Just a really, really compelling story. I mean, there's like some weird things of like, uh, I don't want to spoil this film if you haven't seen it, because I feel like there's a lot. There's like one like little like weird, kind of relationship thing, but outside of that, it is such a heartfelt story in the beginning that really transforms into some surprising plot twists that ends in a really great crescendo of an ending. It is There's so much emotion in this movie, and it is reaching for something really, really difficult, I think, in how its narrative is structured. It's about a girl who has been struggling, and she has an adopted mother, or I think adopted parents, and they send her out to, where her, and I think initial family was from, or her relatives are from. Um, and like already there's like a lot going on here, but she's basically just spending out time in the countryside, and she's struggling with feeling like her adoptive parents feel like she's a burden. And so she's just going through some really difficult coming of age stories. And then she meets this girl who lives in this really pretty mansion on kind of the beach shore. And there's some fantastical vibes to it, some great coming of age vibes. The story doesn't really go in a direction I think would be expected. Um, and it is so good. Like the reveals in it land with amazing impact, and it has a little bit more of the, like it's more of a modern narrative in terms of you're piecing together, it feels like you're reading a novel or something, like you're piecing together this story, you don't have all the facts, and then when it comes together, mixed with the emotions of it, just absolutely knocks it out of the park. And so it feels a little bit different from a lot of Ghibli films in that way, but it's amazing. Like so blown away by it when I watched. Whisper of the Heart is also very soul touching. Yes, Country Road's a absolute banger of a song. Um, and yeah, so we'll talk about that in a bit. But I agree, it does have similar vibes of this category. I think this tier of film, Whisper of the Heart, does. Um, the Secret World of Arietti, I think, is a fun vibes. I'll put it below Howl's. A lot of good stuff in this movie. Most of these films are good vibes. Uh, and so yeah, I really it just doesn't, it just doesn't reach for anything quite as much, I think, as these other films. Like, it doesn't have a character as iconic as Howl, and its execution is not quite as good as a Kiki's or When Marnie Was There. Um, but it is really fun. Uh, totally fun vibes, albeit a bit forgettable. Yeah, like it is probably like closer to minor miss than excellent because of just how stacked this filmography is. Uh, I'm late for the stream. What have I missed so far? We've just been chatting. Basically, I think Only Yesterday is one of the more underrated films. It's a Takahata. If you haven't seen it, great slice of life. Um, that is uh, just a great like coming of retrospective on coming of age, I guess is how I would say. Really, really good. Castle in the Sky is a personal vibe that I love. And so it maybe is a bit higher than I think other people would have it. I think the top three are pretty self-explanatory. Absolute flawless films. And then Howl's just didn't quite hit for me. I don't know if you were here when I was talking about Howl's a little bit, but Arietti's, yeah, really, really solid. I don't think it's, like I can't really outside of Arietti herself, like I can't remember a lot of the characters, like names. Like the dad is like okay. Um, I really like when they break into the house for the first time. It's so good. Only Yesterday was so good. I loved it so much. Yes, I'm glad you've seen Only Yesterday. It just blew me away, and it's something that I I think the more you watch films, the more that you appreciate the subtlety of Only Yesterday. Um, Absolutely incredible. Um, my neighbors, I think they're right here, although I have not seen them. And so I've not seen more than I thought. I thought it was like only a couple, but it is a little more than I first anticipated. So you guys can kind of give me your sales pitch for these films if you've seen them, and we can uh, rank them accordingly. How are you doing, any essays? I'm doing good outside of some random allergies. Hopefully, I don't have another like sneezing attack. But Otherwise than that, doing really good. Hope you all checked out the Hinata video that came out this week, and be on the lookout for a Legacy of Jujutsu Kaisen video. That video also, if you're an anime only, will kind of be talking about the anime in chunks, and then it'll move to spoilers. So I really hope you guys check that out, and I hope that video does well. How are you doing? Is it App Prime or AP Prime? Good to see you again. Yeah, no worries. Let me know if you guys have seen some of these because I'm surprised. I thought I had seen a few more when I was looking through this earlier. I love Castle in the Sky. The music is insane, and the world building is peak. Do you feel like Oda took inspiration for this movie for Skypiea? Honestly, he probably did. Like I think it would be impossible to make something about like you know a continent in the sky or a thing. Um, just app sounds good. But yeah, I think definitely. And yeah, the vibes of it. And I was kind of, if you guys haven't been in here, I was trying to articulate this like weird feeling that I had when I watched this, which is when you watch Castle in the Sky, it's like I feel like I had seen it was like Miyazaki reached into my mind and drew a setting that I had never fully imagined, but it was something that I always wanted to with how the castle is depicted. Like it just feels so natural and something that was in my imagination. Um and it's like I felt that with a couple other settings, like and I compared it to Dune, which is, one of my favorite books, one of my favorite adore the new movies. And I feel like the setting of Dune is so iconic because it captures this weird feeling that's like it just makes sense as a fantasy, you know, construction, even though it had never been done before. I've watched Grave of the Fireflies once and can never watch it again. It broke my heart more after knowing that it's based on a real story. Yeah, it's devastating, and I agree, like, I don't know if I'll be able to watch it. I mean, I'm sure I will because I'm just really interested in film and animation and how narratives are constructed, but, like, it's not something you're turning on, where, like, most of Ghibli films, it's like, I'm feeling bad, like, I'm gonna flip on Kiki's Delivery Service. Um, Not the case with Grave of the Fireflies. That's a really, really tough movie. But Arietti does have a couple of really great sequences to kind of wrap up my thoughts on that. Um, I think when they first break into the house and she goes on her first mission, the design, the vibes of that are so good, and it feels like that movie is going to be a bit better than I think the character relationships end up being. I don't really love the like grandma figure who's just like out to kill like all the little lads, like it's just like not it's not super compelling, I think, compared to just how cool of a setting it is and how cool of a feeling it is earlier on. Howl's Moving Castle is number excuse me. Howl's Moving Castle is number one for me. Yeah, I think it's probably my hottest take. It's the one that I disagree with. People disagree with me the most on. So for my kind of reasoning is I always feel like the narrative is just a little disjointed when I watch it, and the ending never really lands for me like some of the other films. But I can understand that if you're really into the story, like the visuals are so good, Howl's a really compelling character. Um, and I think it is my biggest hot take, I think, in terms of Ghibli films, is not even having it in the excellent category, even though it's right, still a fun time. The Wind Rises is phenomenal. Oppenheimer right before Oppenheimer. Um, let's see here. I'll probably put it right behind Kiki's. This movie has a lot going for it. It is, I like how it's Miyazaki stepping into a little bit of something different than he's typically done. Obviously, it was in a big passion project for him and something that he's struggled with a lot. His love of his family's airplanes, and but also understanding the destruction that they caused, and him kind of trying to come to terms with that in this movie is really interesting. Um, I feel like it's more just like Miyazaki's so good at fantasy that it takes it a tick above The Wind Rises, but The Wind Rises is, like, phenomenal. Um, like, you can't point too many flaws out with it. Um, so yeah, really, really great film. What are y'all's, thoughts on The Wind Rises? I tried loving it, but couldn't. It was too realistic without the whims coming of age, like Whisper of the Heart and Only Yesterday. Yeah, it definitely lacks the coming of age angle, and it lacks the emotion, brutality, and shock of Grave of the Fireflies. Um, but I do still really like it, and it is really close with like Kiki's and When Marnie was there. I haven't seen Wind Rises yet. Yeah, so it's basically Oppenheimer. It's about a plane engineer who gets uh, involved in making planes for the army in World War II, and but also and so it really tries to have the nuances of that, but also leans into some of the lighter sides and so I think thematically it does reach for more. So that's why I personally would have it slightly above into excellent. Um, but I can see how people would have The Wind Rises a little bit lower, especially in terms of their filmography and what you're kind of looking for. I loaned that DVD to a friend and she never returned it, so now I'm salty. That's tough. I get that feeling with like loaning out books. Like I have such a big collection, me and my girlfriend, for books with like manga and just like regular novels. And it's like if people don't return them, all of a sudden I just stop loaning them out because it's like I want to see them on my shelf. Like it's a huge thing. Like they're a decoration in the house, they're a vibe. Um, right. Uh, love the Hinata video because I can relate to Hinata and love that you finally talked about the Brazil arc. Um, and have you thought about making a video talking about Oikawa after high school? Thank you so much. Glad you enjoyed the Hinata video. I really liked the thumbnail for the Hinata video. I mean, there's a couple of different versions, but they're all pretty similar. Yeah, Brazil, it was really fun to finally talk about, and I still didn't talk about it enough, but like that video was getting too long, I thought. So I could have talked about it even more. I've never thought about making a video about Oikawa after high school. I made a lot of Oikawa videos a couple of years ago, and then I just like haven't really made a lot since. Um, and yeah, it would be interesting though. I mean, it's definitely something that I could talk about down the road, but I don't have like any immediate plans for it. Ponyo and Nazca are also S tier for me. Yeah, we'll be talking about those soon. They are both very, very good. So Tales of Earthsea is another one I have not seen. Um, but I'm really and there's actually more of a reason for this is I really want to read some of Ursula. So obviously this is an adaptation, and fairly certain it's not received super well because it's by his son, and maybe it's a decent film. But Ursula K. Le Guin, who is the author of the TLC novels, Tales of Earthsea, she is brilliant, one of the greatest fantasy writers of all time. And, right, there's the story where she did never wanted anyone to adapt her works, and then she saw Spirited Away and said, "That guy can adapt it." And then because of how things worked out, Miyazaki didn't end up directing it, and I think the movie probably suffers because of that. So I really want to read the books first because I read a ton of science fiction and fantasy, and I at least want to read some of her. I don't want to have my interpretation of her work to be misguided. And I'd rather just enjoy this movie for what it is, which is hopefully just like a decent fantasy film. Um, but she is such a iconic author that I really want to check her out first. Princess Mononoke is my personal favorite Studio Ghibli film. It's my favorite Miyazaki film. It is my favorite fantasy film of all time as well. Um, it is so unbelievably good. The animation is maybe my favorite straight hand drawn film, that or probably Akira. Um, Obviously, the production was so difficult for the staff that Miyazaki, that was, I think, the first real time he considered retiring. Um, and if they didn't change how they were making their projects, and they changed, and then he made Spirited Away. Um, I love Ashitaka. I think he's such a unique protagonist, and the fact that he is kind of this outsider to this conflict, and he doesn't really go through an arc, like, he's just kinda awesome throughout, and yet he works really well. This movie kind of breaks a lot of the rules of traditional, character arcs that you're kind of expecting, and yet it works all more for it. Um, yeah, Totoro is, I've got Totoro at number 4. It'll probably be the bottom of peak, or remain bottom of peak. Brilliant, brilliant. I think it's like the best straight kids film of all time. It has a little more depth, I think, than some people give it credit for, but I don't think it's quite on the level of these other three. Yes, my favorite too. That's the one that I keep going back to. I recently watched it with my son, who was maybe a bit too young for this movie, but he loved it too and kept asking questions. That is so amazing. Love that you love Princess Mononoke. Love that your son hopefully really enjoyed it. My nephew from my oldest sister has finally watched like My Neighbor Totoro. He did like maybe about a year ago. And he really, really liked it, and, I wasn't there when he watched it, but we sent him a little Totoro stuffed animal, and so hopefully soon I'll introduce him to Ponyo and hopefully some of these others, eventually. But yeah, Princess Mononoke is, just so good. It captures epic fantasy, and it does so in a pretty decent runtime, right? It's only a little over 2 hours, I think. Maybe it's like almost 2 and a half, but it is, I think, Miyazaki's most grand movie. I think he is him reaching for something greater than he even does with Nausicaa or he does with The Boy and the Heron. Um, I love epic fantasy. That really hits all the vibes thematically. It's phenomenal. Um, and it is it every time you can find so much nuance and new angles to the movie. Not to say you can't with a lot of these other ones, but I think with Mononoke, it's like almost on another level. Um, but obviously, I can understand having Spirited Away or Grave of the Fireflies above it. But personally, for me, Mononoke is my favorite fantasy film. Like, I prefer it over Lord of the Rings. I, prefer it over some big fantasy titles. Like, it just blows me away every time, and it does it through subtlety, which I just love. And it's so crazy that um, like this is a movie that people think is geared towards kids and that kids can enjoy and watch, right? Like, and yet the subtlety of the storytelling is so profound. Um, it's unbelievable. One of the greatest things ever made. I did make a video that got like no views. It got like 800 views or something on Mononoke earlier this year. But I have it privated right now because I had a copyright issue with my Boy and the Heron video. And so I don't want to risk like Studio Ghibli like randomly striking down another one of my videos. I might bring it back up once the strikes cease because I think it's probably okay. So if I do, I'll let everyone know. So maybe one day you guys can watch my video on why Mononoke is Miyazaki's magnum opus, because I really think it is. Um, just phenomenal movie. Nausicaa is very good. I'm gonna put it in. It's definitely an excellent. Um, hmm. I'm gonna put it like this. It feels so Miyazaki, right? Like it is um the a project that he adores. Everyone wants him to revisit it. I've not read the full manga, and I do think if we got a bigger, more realized version of it, it would maybe reach peak. I think the pacing of the film's a little bit wild. Like I think the second half of the film just like doesn't quite hold together. Um, like some of these other narratives, but the vibes, obviously it's very Dune inspired, which is really cool. Like obviously I love Dune and it hits those vibes really, really well. Great coming of age story. It is um, so big in what it's trying to do. It's such an ambitious project, and he doesn't fully hit the mark, I think, in terms of total execution, but I don't think that's really an issue. And so that's why it's not maybe higher up on the excellent. Like the story that's here is as rich as anything. But in terms of the film that we get, and obviously initially wasn't a Ghibli film. This movie was made before the studio, but they kind of adopted it. So I think it's still a good inclusion here. Um, but I just don't think it quite puts everything together as much as some of these others, but it has everything that we love about Miyazaki's there, and it's really cool to see him do it in his first, original feature. Uh, so Love Nazca. Honestly, the first time I watched it, I actually bounced off of it a little bit. I watched it, in school, um, when I was, like, a senior in high school, for, like, a science fiction fantasy literature class, and I bounced off of it a little bit because I feel like in class, it was just, like, hard to get invested into the narrative, and so because of that, some of the nuances, were missed on me a little bit, but rewatching it a couple years later, it's like, "Wow, this movie's unbelievable." Uh, I adore Ponyo. Ponyo is Uh, very nostalgic for me, but I do think Ponyo has to be I'm putting it at the bottom of excellent. Um, Ponyo is such a fun movie. It is such a cool, different take on Little Mermaid. The animation here is just, like, out of this world. Um, I very vividly I watched Spirited Away when I was young, um, but I remember when Totoro came out a lot better, and so that could put this, above fun vibes into excellent for me because it just hit really hard for me, um, when I was a kid and watched it. I think it's just really great execution. It's not quite Totoro levels of execution, but I don't think there's any issues with it. It is, like, a flawless movie overall, but it just doesn't have the depth of some of the others, and so even with my nostalgia, that I really, really have, honestly, more for Ponyo than I think any of his other films, um, I still have to, I try to be a little realistic, I think. Porco Rosso is probably my least favorite. It's honestly maybe it's Arrietty, so I'll put it there. It's still very good, fun vibes. It's like when I went into it with really low expectations because I think if you were to compile a list of everyone's Miyazaki rankings, this is probably going to have the lowest average. Um, and it's a fun movie, good vibes, not quite. On the level of his other works. So again, I had a good time with it, but it didn't blow me away or anything. Um, and so I think because of that, it's just a fun vibe film. Whisper of the Heart though is phenomenal, and I'm actually gonna put it probably just right below Nausicaa. Uh, Country Road is a banger song. I love how it's utilized in that movie. That movie is such a great slice of life. Maybe not quite as executed as well as Kiki's Delivery Service, but not far off. Um, so I think Whisper of the Heart is absolutely great, and it's really sad that, and I could be wrong here, but I believe the director um, who made it ended up passing away not long after, even though he was really young. And he was kind of the person that was perceived to be this next great director to help the studio as Miyazaki and Takahata started to ease off of projects. And so really unfortunate because this movie is brilliant and you can see just how good this director was. And I'm sorry I can't remember his name. But yeah, I love Whisper of the Heart. I think it's really endearing. I think it has one of the best relationships in all of Miyazaki. It's really great, and it's really just a phenomenal reassurance of trying new things, and it's actually just a really uplifting story about finding your passions and things like that, that I think is just really fantastic. Um, and so I feel pretty good about these rankings. I don't have like other images saved. I would put The Boy and the Heron either above or below Grave of the Fireflies. And so we can talk about that just for a second. I haven't seen Earwig or whatever that one is. Um, I imagine that one's the worst. Um, but Boy and the Heron, blown away by. I would imagine a lot of you saw the video when it was still up that I made about why I think it's a masterpiece. The Boy and the Heron, I think, has all of Miyazaki going all out, and even though the narrative's really challenging, really fever dreamy, but the kind of blend of fable storytelling into his narrative, I think was just unbelievably good. Um, I saw it 2 or 3 times in theaters. I think it's out now again, and I definitely could see myself rewatching it soon, like, just blown away by it. So that would go probably right below or above Totoro, below Grave of the Fireflies. So for any of you, if you how would you place maybe Tales of Princess Kaguya or From Up on Poppy Hill? Some of these ones that I haven't seen. My guess at where they would go is like I feel like Kaguya is kind of bottom of peak. I imagine Poppy Hill is top of fun vibes to bottom of excellent. And that's kind of how I imagine. I think like Minor Miss is probably Tales of Earthsea. Um, and then I kind of imagine these other ones are in fun vibes. And honestly, I feel like this one could be seen like this is kind of my expectation for where they would go. And then these kind of in fun vibes. Um, I don't know if a lot of y'all have seen all of these other ones, but is that kind of how you guys interpret, like, do you think Tales of Princess Kaguya is this good, or have you not seen it? I know it's coming to theaters soon. For they're always doing retrospective screenings, and so this year I've been trying to catch a lot of them. But yeah, so I still haven't seen these, so I'll leave these off. But that's kind of my anticipation for where those films are going to end up. Uh, have not seen it. Yeah, I put Kaguya above Mononoke, to be honest. Dang, like as your favorite? Or I mean, you might not have Mononoke number one, but that's really exciting. Like I'm really excited to see Tales of Princess Kaguya. And so yeah, I hope you check that one out, and I will as well. And I'll try to report back honestly on stream. Like, I want the streams to have just like what have you been watching, what's interesting, right? And so as I see some of these, I'll let you all know. Yes, my all-time favorite. Dang, that's high praise. I will report back when I watch it. I really like watching things in theaters, so it's been marked on the calendar for when Tales of Princess Kaguya comes back, to the big theater chains. So I'll definitely let you know. I think the most underrated film out of their list is When Marnie Was There. This movie is unbelievable and honestly could be higher. Like it's definitely not lower. I really, really loved When Marnie Was There. Um, it has the coming of age and whimsical vibes of Ghibli, but it does so in a very different narrative structure than the studio typically does, and it works really well. So if there's one movie that you haven't seen here outside of like, if you haven't seen any of the four classics that I've seen, When Marnie Was There would be my recommendation because I think you'll really enjoy it. And it's just really different for Studio Ghibli, even though it feels still in line. And I wish the director was still with them because I feel like in a great structure, he can do some really, really phenomenal things. I believe he's the director of Arrietty as well, and this is such a step above Arrietty, I think. Mononoke does it for me. I adore Mononoke. Boy and the Heron, honestly, over time could go up as well. Like I love Boy and the Heron, and again, that would be right here, right above Totoro, behind Grave of the Fireflies for now. I think The Wind Rises is good, but I think it makes sense that for a lot of fans of Ghibli, it ends up being a little bit lower. Castle in the Sky also just really does it for me. I love that. And Howl's Moving Castle is one that just every time I watch it, I'm like, this is good. I enjoy it. It doesn't quite move me like these other movies do. Um, so that's kind of my ranking. I guess this is a bit of a shorter stream so far than kind of the last couple streams we've been doing. I wanted to take a break from Haikyuu. I do want to do like an all-star draft of Haikyuu down the road. That'll take a while, so I definitely want to build up to that. So 1 week, I'm streaming a day or a lot of Sundays. Sunday morning streams is what I've been doing, but uh City and Arsenal play tomorrow and I want to watch that, so I figured I'd stream a day earlier. If you guys have any questions or any YouTube related things, feel free to throw them in the chat. We can just kind of talk here for the next couple of minutes, and if there's a lot of questions, I'll stay as long as you guys want to chat with me. But I feel like this is pretty good. I really just wanted to talk Studio Ghibli. I feel like it's just so much fun vibes. And even though there's a little more of this that I haven't seen than I would have liked to, it was a lot of fun for chatting with this. So I'm glad we've had a decent amount of people in here. Love Whisper of the Heart. This is the other movie that I keep going back to. It's such a great movie. Gives me some dopamine as Haikyuu. Yeah, it really does. And yeah, Whisper of the Heart is so good. And when I watch it, it's like I'll be singing Country Road, for weeks on end. You should watch Banana Fish. But it's really good. It's been on my list to watch. Isn't it? It's really sad from, making some shorts about like sad anime. I feel like that one always comes up. When the committee's voting on what anime should be there. Haikyuu are the best anime. Very true. Very true. Peak Haikyuu. Yeah, I don't want all my streams to be Haikyuu focused, even though I know that if I do, I'll get the biggest audience. And so I want to find a good balance of it. But Haikyuu's absolutely peak, and be on the lookout for the Hoshiyumi video. I've not seen Totoro, got to see it now. 100% got to see it. It is so good. It's one of the most wholesome movies ever made. So I'm in Austin, and pretty good film community here, and we have a really big old theater that is downtown Austin, called the Paramount. It holds like 1,200 seats or whatever, and they do like summer classics every year, and they typically do one Ghibli film, and so they did Totoro last year, and so I went to that, and it was on a Sunday, random Sunday afternoon, an extra showing of Totoro. That theater was packed, like probably not sold out packed, but there were people everywhere, and it was one of the best theater experiences I've had. Like all of the, you could just hear all the kids who are watching it for the first time, but also all of the, people who've seen it a dozen times still loving it. Totoro really holds up, so I definitely recommend watching it, and it becomes such a great comfort movie, I think. Top 3 animes to watch before you die suggestion. Very good. Yeah, I definitely need to watch Banana Fish, for sure. Especially as I want to make like go over like my top 50 anime, but I'm trying to hit a few more big ones that I know. I just like haven't gotten to, and I want to do top 50. Like I could do a top 100, but I want to do top 50 so I can like make a top 100 down the road. And so that is definitely something that I want to do, so I can like leave a little bit of room. Kaguya and Poppy Hill are both excellent. Yes, I really, really want to watch both of them. And also, thank you so much for gifting 5 memberships. That is so cool. Yeah, I really appreciate your support of the channel. Have been, so generous. So really, really appreciate that. So very, very cool. And yeah, it's really cool to see you in all these streams. And yeah, so Studio Ghibli's fantastic. I almost watched Poppy Hill last night, but then I just like got too tired. And I was like, I need to get a little bit of sleep before I do this stream. but Poppy Hill is one that I, also really want to see. It just seems like it has great vibes. And is that's by his son as well, and that's his son's best film, I think, from my understanding. Um, LOL, I don't even come to these streams. Well, hopefully you'll come to more now. But yeah, thank you again so much, Angela, for gifting those subs. Yeah, great time to start. Uh, and yeah, is there any other streaming topics you guys are interested? Tier lists. I mean, that's like a lot of what I've been doing recently. As Jujutsu Kaisen ends, I will definitely do a stream talking about the end of that series. But if there's any other topics that you're interested in, yeah, just let me know. And I do want to do the series of kind of maybe talking about 10 of my favorite anime, and going through my top 50, I think would be really, really fun. But yeah, if you guys ever have any, ideas, throw them in a comment on a random stream video, or obviously throw them in here in the chat, and I'll try to get to them. I do want to go up to 2 streams a week, I think, because it's just a lot of fun to talk with y'all. And so again, shout out to Angela. Thanks so much. I think if that's kind of the end of the questions, then that'll probably be it for this stream. And maybe hopefully I'll stream a little bit later in this week. I do want to do a draft with my chat of Haikyuu All-Star Team. I think that would be really, really fun. So that might be next weekend, maybe next weekend or within 2 weekends. So for all the Haikyuu fans, shout out there. And yeah, thanks again for tuning into the stream. Love talking Studio Ghibli. Princess Mononoke, I think, is the peak. And again, shout out to Angela for the gifted subs, and for all the support of the channel. And we'll see y'all in the next stream.